I'm Dan Abrams, and this is our control center at A&E Network headquarters in New York City. We are going to go right back to Nye County, the sheriff's office there, and 7 other departments around the country. This is Live PD.
Dan, how did you learn about the cancellation of the show?
I was informed about half an hour before the announcement was made that the show was going to cease production. And I was obviously very disappointed and frustrated. I'd been fighting hard to keep the show on the air.
Let's jump right into the Javier Ambler case. And what happened what was the process for that footage?
So Live PD was riding with Williamson County deputies at the time of that incident. We were not on a live show. We were not on the air. It was during a hiatus, but the cameras were there. And they followed the Williamson County deputies as they went on the pursuit with Javier Ambler and ultimately with the tasing incident. I never saw the Live PD footage myself, but I've certainly seen the body cam footage, and it is obviously very troubling. The question that has been asked of Live PD is what happened to that footage? And Live PD had a policy in place to keep footage for a certain amount of time and then not retain it. And there was a reason for that. And the reason was so we wouldn't become part of the story. So we wouldn't become an arm of law enforcement to use us as a video repository, or so other attorneys could come and take our video and use them in cases. It was so we could sort of stay out of the legal system and just be chronicling police. But now in retrospect, when you look at what happened here, there should have been an exception for something like this, such that a video like this should have been retained. But this was a following of policy. You can say it was the wrong policy, but that's the reason that the video wasn't retained.
Who set that policy?
That was set by the lawyers for A&E and for the production company.
Was there an arrangement between the police departments and your show? Was there any kind of financial arrangement? Did they get any way, were they compensated for?
No, they didn't get paid. If they had to incur expenses, I mean, if we had to, pay for parking, or if there was something where, somehow someone endured overtime because afterwards they had to deal with something, those are the only kinds of things where Live PD would have incurred, but there was no payment for their involvement in the show. They had certain rights with regard to protecting undercover officers, confidential informants, etc. But in the end, we had the final say about what went on the air.
At the end of the day, is this property dead now, or will you try to take it somewhere else, or maybe do it on your own?
It's not my property. I mean, it's really Big Fish, the production company. I mean, I'm a co-executive producer, but it really belongs to Big Fish. And I don't know what's going to happen now. A&E has talked in its statement about trying to figure out how to recreate something, but I don't think we're going to see Live PD as we've known it again.
If you could recreate it, how would you recreate it, and what steps would you take to correct what's going on and the systematic violence against African Americans? So
first thing I would do was I would make some changes in our policies, right? I think that we should have shown this on the air earlier. It involved a fatality, and the policy at the time was we don't show fatalities on the air. I think it was important enough as a news person. If I'd seen that video, which I never did, I know I would have said we have to show this. I think that's the kind of policy change that could be implemented. But I also think that considering what's going on, we were preparing to begin doing some real outreach, have some town halls, talk about how to incorporate this important and productive movement into what Live PD is doing.
What changes could you make, though, and as you look at the system, where did that tape end up? How did that video stop getting? Why didn't it get to the highest executives involved with Live PD?
Again, it was just a policy that they had in place that was adhered to. And actually, in this case, the Williamson County Sheriff requested that Live PD retain it because in that, the reason that Live PD has this window that they keep it is in case there is a specific legal demand request in the days after something happens. And that happened here. Williamson County asked that the tape be retained while they investigate. The tape was retained. In June of 2019, they informed Live PD that they had the body cam, the investigation had been concluded. It was at that point that the regular policy that had applied kicked in. And again, I wish that there were exceptions. I am heartbroken when I see Javier Ambler's family speaking about their pain. I wish that I had the video. I wish I'd seen the video and could help in some way. And I understand that that can be frustrating. And for some people, it's almost inexplicable. The idea that you wouldn't keep a tape. What do you mean? What do you mean you're not retaining it? And the answer is know that came from a place of know that the effort there was to ensure that we didn't become an arm of law enforcement. And in the end, it was the reverse here. Right. But that was the policy. It was not an effort to protect the police. In fact, you could argue that to some degree it was the opposite.
But say to protect your own behind, wouldn't you, knowing that a case involved someone who died and you've had other cases where people have died, wouldn't you keep a stockpile just in case of like, hey, we were around during this case, hey, this was involved, and also understanding that historically, the systematic violence against African Americans in the police department has been overwhelmingly shown to be beyond and above.
Well, this is a lawyerly-like answer that I'm going to have to give you because it was a legal policy that was in place. And the problem is the minute you start veering off from your policy, you then can't say, this is what we do across the board. The lawyers wanted to be able to say to prosecutors and others who were subpoenaing video, this is our policy. We don't want to be picking sides. We don't want to be, and you can argue there should have been exceptions. And the answer is, I think that's true. There should have been exceptions. And I think in the end, in retrospect, that was a mistake. And it was something that we had been talking about before the show got canceled on how to change it.
And also we have to remember that the video doesn't take sides because it doesn't lie. And it's the same with George Floyd. The video didn't lie. It didn't pick sides. It told the story of what truly happened. And that's been the problem historically, that there aren't people there to actually video, because if there were videotapes, there'd be more police officers under arrest.
And I think that's why Live PD is so important as a concept. I think the fact that we are filming police. I mean, I was questioned today by someone who was saying, in criticizing the show, I've seen a lot of constitutional violations on that show. And my response was, the reason you've seen those is because of Live PD. And I think that that's important in terms of highlighting the good and the bad involving police officers.
How concerning is it that that there has been this systemic violence in police departments? And at what point did you ever have a conversation with any of the police departments that you chose about what happens and what goes on in the past?
See, it's not our job to start telling police officers how to do what they do. If we start telling them that, then we are now an arm of law enforcement. We are now part of what they do. And that was not our goal. Our goal was to chronicle what law enforcement did, was to document what law enforcement did. And in fact, there were times when there were people who were watching the show getting angry that our camera people weren't getting involved. An officer would be involved in a wrestling match, some sort of event with a suspect, and people would say, how come your camera person didn't get involved and help the officer? I get that, but the minute we start doing that, we're no longer there just to chronicle it. We are now participants in the event.
You guys just got renewed for a month ago for 160 new episodes, and you were generally #1 in your time slot on cable television when you aired. How much of that shows how much that A&E was really disturbed that they pulled a show that was so big?
A&E was clearly under a lot of pressure here to pull the show. And again, I get it. I get why people are angry and people want change. That's a good thing. I think we're getting better as a society because of what we're seeing with a lot of these protests. But I also think there's a risk of going too far. And in my view, the same people who are calling for body cams on police officers, which I support, and I support the uniformity of the use of them as well, should be saying that there's a place for live PD. They may say they want changes. They may say they want to see the show different. But the bottom line is I still think that they should be also saying there's a place for live PD.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, you have to look at, in many instances, police are turning off their body cams so that they aren't being, so that they don't get criminally indicted, and they are also turning around and it disappears on a regular basis. So that's what makes this case so interesting and important, because you had something and you knew about something that was being basically brushed under the rug for a while.
Well, wait, but the body cam footage is there. This is not a case where there wasn't body cam footage. I mean, they have body cam footage. Your point about body cams, and this is why I said before, they need to be used uniformly. There has to be policies about how they're used, so there can't be discretion about when they're used. But in this case, there was body cam footage. It's the reason. Again, I'm confused as to why people aren't angrier at law enforcement, the district attorney, and some of the others who didn't say we need more information. Why are they just coming out now, 15 months later, and saying, hey, by the way, where's your tape? The position that Live PD had taken was, we'll hold this, we're holding it. There was no request. And I get it. The answer is, well, why do you need a request? Why do you need a request to turn over?
And you don't. Why do you need a request of a man who died and you have the video of it? Why does someone have to request that? Why isn't your moral compass saying, let's hold on to this because this could be a situation? And I'm not talking about morality. I'm talking about the moral compass of the world.
I'd go a step further, and I'd say that if I'd seen the tape when it happened, I would have advocated not just for turning it over, but for putting it on the air. Which would have immediately drawn attention to this. And again, the point is this was not a cover-up, right? I mean, I get it that people are going to say, well, A&E's policy about not showing a fatality was wrong, okay? Let's have a discussion. The policy that they had in place about not retaining video was wrong. Again, I think there should have been an exception there. But the point is that this has been an ongoing investigation for well over a year. And the first place that people should be asking questions of is the district attorney, the other police departments, and others who are investigating this. That's the first place to ask questions. Then come to Live PD.
Yeah, and Dan, I hear you. I just don't think people trust the police department because, as we've seen—
What about the prosecutor? I mean,
the prosecutors haven't, in many cases, as we know, and we could go down a historic laundry list, the prosecutors have either undercharged or overcharged so they can't convict, and then these people walk free, and then there's a reckoning that happens out. The only way to reckon anything is out in the streets. So the belief is that there is a trust factor that we can turn to someone else who shot it.
But the problem is, what I'm hearing is a desire for us to become advocates.
That's not advocacy.
You're asking for us. Look, you're asking for us to start judging.
That's not
what is on the videos, and therefore what we should turn over to law enforcement. And you know what? In the context of the death of Javier Ambler, I think there should have been an exception to the rule, period.
But it's not judging, it's being a human being. You know,
Again,
think about
being a human being is about judgment. It is. And again, maybe I'm too much of a lawyer. Maybe I'm too much of a lawyer in that
I'm married to a lawyer.
Yeah. And I mean, that I know the legal standards. I know the minute you start veering off of particular standards and policies, you will pay a legal price. But in the end, again, and I hope that whatever you guys use for this interview, that it's clear, I think we should have had an exception.
Right.
I wish we had the video.
I hear you.
I think,
it's just that the legal standard, if you understand the history of legal standards, I mean, you know, we're just removed from the legal standard is not being able to be vote. You know, before that being 2/3 a man. You know, there are lots of things that were the legal standard that were humanely illegal.
And this is why I'm saying I understand why A&E and Big Fish had this policy.
Yeah,
I do, and I think it came from a good place. And yet I think there should have been an exception. I'm sorry there wasn't. I'm heartbroken for the family.
Yeah.